The Jedi of the High Republic, led by the likes of Yoda, Avar Kriss, Elzar Mann, amongst others, have been working for a while to discover the secret to the origin of the Blight, but they think they found the link between that and the Nameless creatures. But will Marchion Ro beat them to it to use this knowledge against them? Let's dive in. Hey YouTube, welcome to the Force Feed. I'm John, and today we're going to be talking about the High Republic Trials of the Jedi. This book takes place in 230 BBY, so it's about 200 years before Episode 1, and it was written by Charles Soule, who was also the writer of Light of the Jedi, back when the Phase 1 came out. Before we dive into this overview, I just want to remind everyone that if you want to purchase this book and read it before you watch my take on it, there will be a link in the description for this book, as well as the next 3 books that I'll read on this channel. Just please keep in mind that I'm an Amazon affiliate, so if you use those links to make any purchases, it will help me or the channel in some way. Also, make sure to like this video and subscribe to my channel so my content continues to dominate your YouTube feed. The Blight has gotten stronger, and Marchion Ro, the Eye of the Nile, thinks he has an answer to stopping it. It's even appeared on different worlds all over the galaxy, including Coruscant. The Jedi have actually secretly been holding back its spread in the basement of the Jedi Temple. However, the Jedi actually do believe they've discovered a connection between the Blight and the Nameless creatures. The Jedi began collecting the Nameless creatures, 12 of them to be exact, and have discovered their homeworld. They plan to return the creatures to their homeworld called Sophros, believing that the Nameless being separated from their world may have had some kind of effect that started the Blight. They've designated 9 Jedi to travel to Sophros, as well as the 200-year-old fallen Jedi, Azlyn Rel, who fell to the dark side some time ago. In the meantime, Marchion Ro offered the Republic the opportunity for him to solve the Blight pandemic for them. However, the Chancellor of the Republic, Lina So, distrusted his perceived agenda and declined his offer. This made Marchion upset simply because he couldn't understand why the Republic wouldn't be desperate for anyone's help at this point. He also recently learned of the Jedi's plans to bring Nameless creatures back to their homeworld. He then set on his own journey to the Nameless homeworld, but for a different reason than the Jedi. The Nameless still have the same effect on the Jedi as before, so they were actually able to construct an armor that nullifies the effect so they can safely travel with them to this homeworld of theirs. They're hoping that they find some answers on this world. However, they don't have a cohesive plan on what that answer is or how to actually stop the Blight from spreading. They quickly discover that landing on this homeworld is proving to be very, very difficult. There were safeguards to interrupt people from landing on the planet, and they actually proceed to crash land, which affects their ability to safely remove the Nameless from their spacecraft. Upon exiting the Ataraxia and doing a little exploring, they realize how much of a connection this place has to the Force. It's almost nauseating, overwhelming feeling to them. They also soon find out that Marchion Ro has also made a journey to the same world and has an alternate agenda. While the Jedi believe returning the creatures to this homeworld can stop the Blight from spreading, Marchion believes killing off the Nameless can spread it even quicker, potentially killing off the entire galaxy or even universe. I assume that his anger at the Republic has prompted him to do this, since they wouldn't agree to accept his help, so he's basically just gone scorched earth on the entire galaxy. The Jedi must now race against time and against Marchion as he uses his Power Stone to coerce the Nameless into attacking each other, which is the same stone that he used previously to control the Nameless creatures. But given how much is revealed in the final 100 pages or so of this book, I'm not going to delve into all the details, because without practically reading it chapter by chapter, it gets pretty lengthy. There's a lot that's revealed and a lot that's talked about. So rather than do that, instead, let's proceed to discuss what I found interesting about this book. In the Star Wars universe, did you know that what we know as a watch is actually called a chrono? It makes sense. It's a tool that helps you follow the chronology of time as it passes forward, which I suppose will be different depending on the planet that you're from. However, I believe that most time in the Republic follows the Galactic Standard Time, or GST, which follows the rotational and orbital cycles of Coruscant, since that's the galactic capital of the Republic. Naturally, the time equals out to about the same amount of time you find on Earth, such as 24 hours in a day, 365 days in a year, etc. Yoda's power is so great that when fighting off the Blight in the basement of the Jedi Temple, he's summoned to return upstairs in the temple, but must have some people replace him to fend off the Blight. It took 4 other Jedi to equal the output of power that Yoda could summon to fight off the Blight. This isn't particularly outrageous. We all know Yoda is arguably the most powerful being in the galaxy at this point, but it's definitely impressive to quantify it into how many people it would take to replace him in, say, like a fight against a Sith Lord, something like that. Definitely interesting. Like mentioned before in this overview, the Blight and the Nameless creatures share a direct connection with respect to the health of the Nameless creatures and how fast the Blight spreads. You'll discover later in this book that the death of any nameless creatures can directly speed up the spread of the Blight across the galaxy. The effect the nameless creatures have on the Force is pretty immense, and the implications of their homeworld itself on the state of the Force and the state of the galaxy are equally immense. I'll let you get to that point in the book before I spoil it for you. Tolisian Ore is a special metal discovered within the Republic and has the ability to repel the Blight and repel the effects the nameless creatures seem to have on the Jedi. This is actually the very material the Jedi use to construct the armor that allows them to safely travel to Sophros with the Nameless on board and experience their world without succumbing to any effects it may have on their well-being, like when they had that nauseating, overwhelming effect that I mentioned earlier. The only problem I have with all the introduction of these concepts is that these could have massive implications in the fate of the galaxy and in the upcoming Skywalker saga, but we have yet to see any connection as to why it all just disappears. Eriadu is the ancestral home of the Tarkin family. You know Grand Moff Tarkin is the second in command in episode 4. It also serves as a vital hyperspace route trading hub in the galaxy and is crucial to be controlled by either the Republic or the Nihil to have a leg up in their fight against each other. In this book, it's under Nihil control, but there are RDC or Republic Defense Coalition forces that are hiding down on the planet. Marchion admits that he didn't expect there to be an uprising on the planet. However, before there had a chance to be one, he had sent General Vias there days prior just in case there was an uprising. So he didn't expect there to be one, but he anticipated one anyways. General Vias is the highest ranking general, or to my knowledge, in the Nihil military. So on a whim, you're going to send your highest ranking general to a planet that may or may not have an uprising soon against you. Please make it make sense. The Jedi had records of the Nameless homeworld at one point centuries earlier, but somehow those records were stolen from the Jedi archives and handed down to officials within the Nihil after their strong wall expanded. Safe travel to the Nameless homeworld Sophros involves traversing through an area called the Veil, which is the treacherous, seemingly protectant surrounding the planet that makes landing on the planet ever more difficult for the Jedi that travel there. Likely the people first mentioned to possess the Nameless against the Jedi, the Path of the Open Hand, you might remember me talking about them in previous overviews, got their hands on this knowledge in order to come in possession of the Nameless since they were so against the Jedi's use of the Force. Since Marchion's ancestors come from this religious sect, this is arguably the most likely conclusion to how the Nameless were first removed from their homeworld to begin with. To safely land the Jedi spacecraft through the Veil and onto Sophros, the Jedi are tasked with working together with the Force almost in a hive mind to control the Ataraxia, getting it past the Veil and roughly crash landing it on the planet's surface. It's not that we haven't seen this before. The Jedi perform this kind of power in The Light of the Jedi, which was also written by Charles Soule, so it kind of makes sense that he would bring this sort of power back into the next book. However, this isn't a power that we see to any extent within the Skywalker saga or later. Is the Jedi's an ability to act in concert with each other through the Force in some way a contribution to their downfall later? It may seem that way. General Vias makes her return in this book, and this time tasked with visiting the world of Eriadu to quell RDC forces that Marchion suspects could create an uprising on the planet. This is also the former rival of Porter Engle, which is my favorite High Republic character, the 300-plus-year-old Blight of Bardotta, who is less of a Jedi anymore and more of a virtuoso swordsman and hermit. He still possesses the value of a Jedi, but it almost feels like he prefers the competition of aggressive negotiations with suitable combatants like General Vias. Weirdly enough, his confrontation with Vias in this book ends pretty quickly in relation to his previous fights with her, claiming that he almost appreciated her survival as a connection to his dead sister. He claims he's over her being that connection and ends that connection pretty quickly. There's a starship mentioned in chapter 14 that's described as a pleasure yacht, but categorized as Purrgil Class. In order to be in Purrgil Class category, I imagine you need to be quite the monster of a starship, since Purrgils are literally giant creatures that can survive in the vacuum of space and travel to light speed at will. We get to see them twice actually in the Rebels series and in the Ahsoka series. But can you name me any other ships that are in Purrgil Class category? In case you didn't know this already, the Blight is somewhat of a pandemic disease in the galaxy that is best described as having the absence of life. By saying this, I don't mean that what it affects becomes dead per se, but that what it affects saps any evidence that said object had any life to begin with. It almost saps it of its organic energy. The item it affects simply turns into an ashy husk devoid of any energy. If you thought of that in terms of Star Wars, it's almost like the midichlorians that gave the object or being any life were sucked out of it or made to disappear. While on Sophros, Avar and Elzar are exploring and trying to find some kinds of answers to the galaxy and stumble upon some kind of ball of energy in the middle of a clearing. Elzar discovers that he can enter this ball as if it's a portal of some kind, but upon entering, Avar and Elzar quickly realize that the Force is somewhat muted for them. Avar usually describes experiencing the Force as a song that she can hear. She can't hear the song in this place. Avar asks Elzar, do you think we're dead? Elzar responds, no, I don't think there's anything after death, really. Was there really no Jedi in history before that had a concept of an afterlife or any belief that something after death occurred? It's just weird for a Jedi to say this, since you might think the belief of the Jedi Order would be that of a life transforming into the Force and existing in the netherworld of the Force. Was this a weird thing for Elzar to say? I kind of felt like it was. In Sulfuros, and more specifically in the portal that Avar and Elzar enter into, there appears to be a dark section to this portal and a light section. Due to the death of a bunch of nameless creatures, the Force appears to be off balance, causing the spread of the Blight. Normally, there are nameless creatures, but not mindless predators like the ones we've seen previously, but regal, intelligent creatures that exist within this part of the world, that hold the balance of the Force for the rest of the galaxy. Due to the balance being thrown off, Avar and Elzar come to the conclusion that they must remain on the planet to exist as a source of light and a source of dark. Avar would be the source of the light, and Elzar, since he touched the dark side before without being seduced by it, would be the source of the dark. This speaks to the way that the authors of the High Republic have treated the nature of the Force, because in the past, in the EU and George Lucas would often treat the Force as a large plane that's in balance when it stays in the light, and then the dark side is like a corruption of that light, or like a cancer. The High Republic instead views the Force as two balancing entities, equally between the light side and the dark side, but it feels like that this would be the universally accepted representation of the Force from most fans. Lastly, we finally are revealed the name of the nameless creatures, so I can stop saying nameless creatures this whole time. They are called the Shrikarai. Given how impacted the rest of the galaxy is by the treatment of these creatures in the planet Sulfuros, it's a pretty crazy concept to introduce that takes place 200 years before the Skywalker saga even starts. However, upon learning about those implications, the Republic makes plans to protect this planet and make sure people don't visit it ever again. Thus, the disruption of the planet is definitely minimized going forward, and the idea of even the dark side Force users visiting the planet to use the nameless creatures wouldn't really make much sense considering what they've done to other Force users. So you can at least explain away its absence in later stories, even if you don't want to use the more boring answer, it wasn't written about yet. Quote unquote. Yeah, okay, thanks. Let me enjoy my Star Wars now. So this concludes the things that I found interesting about today's book, and overall it was a very, very enjoyable book. So far, most of the High Republic has been pretty entertaining, with the exception of a couple of books. You'll have to go back and see my reviews on those to see which ones I'm talking about. And I definitely took large breaks in between reading this book because I started to get burned out on the channel, kind of in between the last book and this book. I do want to try to get back into it and be more consistent because I want to try to continue the journey of reading and collecting and sharing that journey with all of you. So I'm going to give this book an 8.8, and it's absolutely a must read for your High Republic collection. And as an overall Star Wars story and just a general fiction book, it's definitely a great read. I feel like if I had read it all the way through in a much shorter time frame, I'd probably get a higher score, but I'm trying to account for that, so I think 8.8 is pretty fair. But I want to thank everybody that stopped by to watch today's video, and I appreciate each and every one of you who did. May the Force be with you, and everybody have a great rest of your day. Thank you.